Welcome to Module 4, the role of stakeholder participation and communities in groundwater quality management, forming part of the online course on groundwater quality management. My name is Kevin Peterson and I will be your module presenter. In this presentation, the building blocks of good water governance will be introduced. The type of governance system influences water governance. The most important impediment for good water governance is the dominance of hierarchical and market-led rather than distributed governance systems. There is an ever-widening gap between countries that have moved towards subsidiarity, performing functions at the lowest effective level, and countries that remain centralized and stagnant. There is growing dissatisfaction with ineffective but costly state machinery, lack of vision or leadership, weak financial discipline, and political dictates that cripple administrative functions. Many propose the market as a solution to economic growth, social equity, and environmental problems. This has led to deregulation, greater private sector involvement, and a changed role for civil service and civil society. This approach reduced government control and promoted private enterprise with the market as the superior resource allocation mechanism. However, markets do not necessarily work well either in all situations and may not be representative of wider societal values. Distributed governance calls for partnerships between government, civil society, and the private sector. Neither the state nor the private sector can solve societal, especially social environmental problems alone. Good governance requires good relationship within relevant organizations with separate mandates and responsibilities. Most of these organizations, whether community or government-led, have little formal or practical authority and insufficient resources. Polycentric governance systems disperse political authority to separate bodies with overlapping, non-hierarchical related jurisdictions. Adaptive management literature suggests that management systems should have multiple centers of power, polycentric rather than one, monocentric. 5 elementary building blocks for sound water governance have been identified. These are a powerful administrative organization of water management, legally embedded system of water law, an adequate financing system and economic analysis of water measures, a systematic planning approach, the participation of stakeholders. Without these building blocks, there can be no sound water governance. Good water management comprises 3 layers: a content layer, an institutional layer, and a relational layer. The content layer. In addition to knowledge of the water systems and the nature of the problems, a good information position and the experience and skills required to solve the problems are also essential. Institutional layer. An adequate organizational framework together with the necessary legal instruments and good financing structure are fundamental requirements. Relational layer. Important elements of this layer are communication and cooperation between different actors and with the public stakeholder participation, transparency, and trust. Stakeholder participation and engagement is one of the main building blocks of water governance. The water governance has triggered new emphasis on the role of stakeholder engagement across public, private, and non-profit sectors. Combined with structural and conjunctural drivers, they have pushed stakeholder engagement to develop along different rationales. A range of long-term structural drivers have triggered a change in water governance paradigms to better cope with future challenges. They can be clustered in into four broad categories. Climate change will affect water availability and resilience of water infrastructure with different levels of impact across the world. Economic and demographic trends will drive water demand, and in particular in cities, and affect the capacity of governments to respond. Socio-political trends such as the concept of integrated water resource management and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals will set new standards, regulations, and aspirational goals, paying greater attention to adaptive governance. Innovation and technologies will stimulate greater connectivity and new relationships, in particular related to web-based communication avenues. Stakeholder engagement has also been triggered by conjunctural drivers and greatly influenced by changing circumstances and situations. Water-related disasters, policy reforms, big infrastructure projects, competing water demands, and greater democratic pressures have pushed for more inclusiveness in water-related decision-making and policy project implementation. Groundwater stakeholders are those who have an important interest in the resource of a specified aquifer. They may be because they use groundwater, or because they practice activities that could cause or prevent groundwater pollution, or because they are concerned with groundwater resource and environmental management. The potential range of stakeholders is large, and their active participation should contribute to the sustainability of groundwater resources and related economic activity. In this figure, the various possible levels of representation and degrees of interaction, which will vary somewhat according to the specific case, are shown schematically. All stakeholders for a given groundwater body need to be identified and provision made to ensure their fair representation in the institutional mechanism defined for aquifer management. The functions that can be performed in groundwater management are summarized in this table. Some measures are relatively easy to implement, for example, maintaining distance between boreholes or bans on certain types of crop. Other measures require more coordination, management, and even enforcement, which require a more sophisticated and robust institutional setup. Community engagement in participatory groundwater management only exceptionally comes about spontaneously, and in general will need to be enabled and nurtured by the appropriate national and local government support and civil society organizations. Thank you for listening to this presentation.